Hello and welcome back everyone. Today we are here to talk about what I think is objectively one of the best animated shows of all time. Certainly the best narrative show that Nickelodeon has ever made. A show that has now had a sequel series, a live action movie, a live action series, and now has an animated sequel film in the works. That's right, today we are talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Okay, so let's just get something out of the way up front. This was my first time ever watching the show, aside from catching a few scenes here and there when it was originally airing on Nickelodeon and my little sister was watching it. And then starting in like 2008, 2009, a couple of my close friends got really into Avatar: The Last Airbender and started telling me I should watch it. But I just wasn't really into the idea of an animated kids show that told one overall story, even though I loved like Spider-Man the animated series for this exact reason. So over the years they'd keep recommending it and I'd keep saying no, and eventually just sort of turned into a bit that required nothing from me but annoyed my friends, so I kept it up for over 15 years just for fun. And then a couple of years ago I started to get more and more into animated TV shows. I watched like Cowboy Bebop, Invincible, Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, you know, the most entry-level shit possible, but I still hadn't watched Avatar, which is a show that I think many people would probably call the crown jewel of entry-level animated storytelling. And then I decided to start a YouTube channel and I realized it was the perfect excuse to finally kill the bit and watch the show. I'd been tempted a few times over the years, but again, never so tempted that the idea of ending the bit was actually worth it to me. I am, in fact, what we like to call a little stinker. And look, I admit this is obnoxious behavior, and so to my friends that I annoyed for years, here's your official apology.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry, very sorry.
Because here's the thing, Avatar: The Last Airbender is kind of incredible. From the world it builds to every character inhabiting that world to some of the most satisfying character arcs I've ever seen in any storytelling medium, Avatar: The Last Airbender is in fact a nearly perfect show, and I've got a lot to say about it. But before we get too deep into my thoughts, let's just cover some quick background. Oh, and I'll put up a big spoiler warning before I dive too deep into any major plot spoilers, but I will be talking about the overall story of the show starting now. Avatar: The Last Airbender was created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko and ran for 3 seasons on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008. The show is set in an Asian-inspired world where some people have the ability to control one of the 4 elements: air, water, earth, and fire. And each of these elements are separated into different nations. So we've got the air nation, the water nation, etc. But there's only one person who can master all 4 elements, the Avatar, who is reincarnated into a new nation after the death of the current Avatar, which is where our main character Aang comes into play. He is the current Avatar from the Air Nation, and unfortunately for him and the entire world, this dummy got trapped in a block of ice for 100 years, and in that time, the Fire Nation has started a world war and committed genocide against all of the Air Nation. So Aang quite literally is the last Airbender. We follow Aang's story as he learns to master the 4 elements and tries to end the war that the Fire Nation started. And the entire world of Avatar began back in 1995 at a Halloween party when Michael and Brian met and talked about their love of animation, and the two would go on to start working together later that year, with Brian helping Michael paint background animation cells for one of Michael's animated short films he was working on. And in 2002, Brian got a job in the art department on the show Invader Zim. Wow, I haven't thought about Invader Zim in years. I'm gonna have to revisit that at some point. Anyway, this gave him an in Nickelodeon where he met and became friendly with Eric Coleman, who was the head of development at Nickelodeon. And he told Brian and Michael that the network was looking for their own version of a Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings-esque non-violent animated kid show that had a heavy emphasis on both action and lore. But then the two creators would go on to take inspiration from things like Cowboy Bebop, the films of Hayao Miyazaki, martial arts, yoga, and kung fu movies. Which is pretty cool, right? Like, these guys were given the criteria of non-violent animated kids show with a young person in the lead inspired by Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and what they came back with was something more inspired by things objectively less popular than either of those properties, but because the story and influences they did take from so strongly worked together, the show was greenlit and put into production. And on February 21st, 2005, the first episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender premiered on Nickelodeon, and it would go on to run for 3 seasons and 62 total episodes. And the show did incredibly well for Nickelodeon, both in the ratings and with critics. The 5-part finale of Avatar averaged 5.6 million viewers, which is a pretty insane number by 2008 standards, and an even more insane number by today's standards, and the show also holds a perfect 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that Rotten Tomatoes is the end-all be-all of critical reception, but it is an interesting metric to look at and talk about. And the show has gone on to become an absolute classic, and I think a lot of people would classify it as a cult classic, but I don't think you can actually do that with that show. It's objectively a classic piece of television storytelling. When the show was added to Netflix back in May of 2020, it shot up to the #1 most watched TV show within 4 days of being added. And the show is so popular that, again, we've had 2 live-action adaptations of it over the course of just 15 years. Plus, there's The Legend of Korra, a sequel animated series that ran for 4 seasons and 52 episodes. Okay, and from here, I am going to start talking about the plot of the show, so if you haven't seen the show, this is your last warning. Moving on. Let's just run through the plot of each of the books and my thoughts on each of them, and then I'm going to do character breakdowns and talk through the main arcs and what makes each character special. Book 1 of Avatar is the most simple of the 3. It's where we get all of our setup. Oh, and one more quick note before we go any further. I'm only going to use character names in this section of the video. I will go over all of the characters' voice actors a little bit later in the video when I break down the characters. So book 1 opens with our 2 co-leads, brother and sister duo, Sokka and Qatara, out on a fishing expedition. And we see that Qatara is a waterbender right away. Well, kinda. She's working on it. And then Sokka says something shitty and misogynistic to his sister, and I'll wait to talk more about this later, but I will say watching Sokka go from being a boys rule, girls drool type of character to someone who works on a team with multiple women he loves and respects is just one example of how great the arcs on the show are. Okay, so Sokka is shitty and Katara freaks out, and this brings up the iceberg that contains Aang. And the two free him, which causes a massive beam of light to shoot in the air, and this is where we meet Prince Zuko and his Uncle Iroh, who I think are my 2 favorite characters, but again, more on that in a little bit. And we learn that Zuko is desperately searching the world, looking for the Avatar after being banished from the Fire Nation, and his uncle is accompanying him. And this really sets up the main conflict of the first book of the show, Zuko trying to hunt down the Avatar while Aang, Katara, and Sokka do their best to avoid being captured. Like I said earlier, this first book really is the most simple of the 3. It's really more of an adventure of the week type show with an overarching story stretching through pieces of each of the episodes. But I think realistically you could pop in and watch like 75% of the episodes from book 1 as standalone episodes, or maybe not standalone episodes, but the story stuff you wouldn't get would be minimal and wouldn't decrease your overall enjoyment of the episode. One of the things that I found really interesting about book 1 specifically is that Dave Filoni directed 8 of the episodes, and Filoni would go on to work across a bunch of different Star Wars titles, including The Mandalorian, and I gotta say, I was reminded of the first season of The Mandalorian a lot while watching through this first book. The main story of book 1 centers around our trio of heroes trying to make their way to the North Pole to find Aang and Katara, a waterbending master, to study under. And along their journey, they meet lots of new and interesting people, most of whom will come back into play in the final book of the show, which is pretty cool. It shows that they really had a great handle on how they wanted this show to play out. Some of the standout episodes from this book for me were episode 3, The Southern Air Temple. Honestly, a pretty heavy episode that sees Aang grappling with the genocide of his people. Episode 12, The Storm. This is where we learn how Aang actually ended up frozen in the ice where they found him. He ran away from the air temple after learning he was the Avatar. And I'll get more into this in the character section, but I think this is such a strong starting point for Aang. He's already rejected his destiny, and now he's forced to confront the reality he created by running away. It's just really strong storytelling. This is also where we learn Zuko's true origin, why he was banished, and why he has the massive scar on his face. And again, just an incredible starting point for a character like Zuko. And we also get Zuko's first true moment of redemption when he allows the Avatar to escape in favor of saving his own crew. Episode 13, The Blue Spirit. This is also a really strong episode, and again shows us that Zuko is a much more complicated character than we initially thought. And then the 2-part finale, The Siege of the North, is hands down the strongest episode of the first book. First of all, the love story between Sokka and Yue is just incredible writing. I really loved this storyline, and it really showed Sokka going through a lot of character growth. I mean, all of our leads really grow a lot in this finale. Sokka learns to love and lose love. Katara is made a waterbending master and Aang's official waterbending teacher, and Zuko and Aang both grow in terms of understanding their place in the world, and that maybe they aren't as opposed confused as they originally thought. I also love how Uncle Iroh just fully turns against the Fire Nation in this episode. I'll talk a lot more about him later, but I love Uncle Iroh. And the last thing I want to say about this finale is that Ko, the Face Stealer, is one of the coolest looking creatures of the entire series. Oh, and the finale ends with a tease of Azula, who is low-key the real antagonist of the entire series. But moving on to Book 2, Earth. This is where the show really began to pop off for me, and it makes sense. I enjoyed the first batch of episodes, but like I said earlier, it feels largely episodic to me. I think that Book 1 is a really good kids animated show, but Books 2 and 3 are just great animated storytelling, period. Which I guess isn't all that surprising considering, like any good generic millennial, I also think Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie. I like the darker middle chapters of stories, I guess. Book 2 kicks off with Aang in search of an earthbending teacher, which we find in episode 6 with Toph, who kinda goes on to become one of my favorite characters, and at the very least, Toph is the source of a lot of the best jokes running throughout books 2 and 3, because Toph is blind and the show really leans heavily on that for bits. But more on Toph later. So once Toph joins our crew, the season really kicks into gear, and we learn about an upcoming eclipse that will render the Fire Lord and all firebenders useless for 8 minutes. But unfortunately, while our crew is learning about this, Appa is stolen by a group of sand raiders, and just real quick, let's talk about this. Appa getting stolen was actually the thing that got me to finally binge multiple episodes of the show in one sitting. Before that, I would watch 2 episodes max in one sitting, but I remember that once Appa was taken, my wife and I watched like 6 episodes in a row because we were just waiting for Aang to get Appa back. So Appa getting taken leads our crew to Ba Sing Se, and don't worry if you can't remember that name because they'll repeat it 50,000 times. And Ba Sing Se is where we spend a majority of this book and is where all of our major storylines converge as the season goes on. There's obviously Aang and the crew looking for Appa and also trying to get an audience with the Earth King so they can tell him about the upcoming eclipse. However, the entire city is under control by this jerk, Long Feng, and his secret police, the Dai Li, and they refuse to acknowledge that the war is even happening, even though Ba Sing Se is the largest refugee center in the world. Again, it's good, compelling storytelling. At the same time, there's also Zuko and Iroh who've made their way to Ba Sing Se and are hiding out as refugees. And this is where their story arcs really solidify as the strongest in the show. They get jobs working in a tea shop, but soon Iroh's tea skills become so known that he and Zuko are given the chance to open their own tea shop in Ba Sing Se's upscale district where all the rich people live. And then we also have Azula and her 2 partners, Mai and Ty Lee, who've joined forces to help Azula with tracking down the Avatar. And I kind of love these 3, but again, we'll talk a little bit more about them later when I go through the episodes. But I'll just say this, I love how these 3 snuck into the Earth Kingdom by dressing as the Kyoshi warriors, and how Sokka vouches for them sight unseen. Again, just really strong writing on display here. Unlike book 1, there are probably a dozen or so episodes I could cite here as my favorites from book 2, but I'm gonna keep it brief and keep it to 4 like I did for book 1. Episode 8, The Chase. This is where I feel like Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee are really shown to be true threats to our heroes because we spend the entire episode, well, being chased by them. It reminded me of those early episodes of Battlestar Galactica when the crew has to make a new jump every 33 minutes before the Cylons would catch up to them, so none of them could eat, sleep, or take a break longer than 33 minutes. Man, I should really rewatch Battlestar Galactica soon. Let me know if you guys want a retrospective on that in the comments. Anyway, The Chase is a great episode because it shows that Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee are capable of overpowering our heroes. They're all a little further along in their abilities, and to be completely honest, they're a little smarter than our heroes. And I just thought this episode was great at establishing these 3 as true threats that weren't just going to go away. Episode 15, The Tales of Ba Sing Se. Honestly, this episode is in the running for the best of the entire show. This is pure short form storytelling magic, as it's made up of 6 short stories told from various characters' perspectives, but the standout here is obviously the tale of Iroh. We follow Iroh as he makes his way through the city, performing small acts of kindness before arriving at his final destination in the countryside, where he finds a small area to celebrate his son's birthday. And we learn that his son had been killed in the Battle of Ba Sing Se, which Iroh led as a general for the Fire Nation army, and he quietly cries as he sings a song for his son. It's just beautiful storytelling, and the entire episode is dedicated to the memory of Uncle Iroh's original voice actor, Meiko Iwamatsu, who sadly passed away just a few weeks prior to this episode's premiere. Like I said, this episode might actually be the best of the entire series. Episode 16, AAs Lost Days. If the previous episode is the best in the series, then this one takes the cake for the saddest episode in the series. Honestly, I don't even want to spend too much time talking about it because it's just really sad. We follow Appa in the days that follow him being taken from Aang, and he's constantly being abused and mistreated until he makes his way back to Aang, only to be kidnapped again, this time by Long Feng. Episode 20, The Crossroads of Destiny. So the thing I really like about this episode is that all of our heroes fail. They lose, and Azula and her friends win. Even Zuko loses by joining with them. And Ba Sing Se is finally conquered by the Fire Nation. It's just a really strong way to end this book and puts our characters in an interesting spot at the beginning of book 2. Okay, moving on to book 3, Fire. The last book of the entire story, and we follow as Aang searches for and finds a firebending teacher in Zuko, all in preparation to fight the Fire Lord. And look, here's my one and only complaint with the show. I thought the ending was a little underwhelming. I wasn't exactly disappointed or anything, but I remember when it ended thinking, that's it? It just felt like there was more to be done. I would have loved to follow along as Zuko looks for his mom and Aang, Qatara, and Sokka navigate being war heroes while simultaneously trying to help rebuild the world now that the war is over. It's just that the end of a war is never really the end of the story, you know? Okay, maybe I'm expecting too much out of the show. It told the story the creators set out to tell, and I guess I just wanted more. But seriously, overall, this is a great book. I like how we open with Zuko and May now in a relationship, and Zuko having gotten everything he's ever wanted, but he still feels miserable because he betrayed his uncle and everything they've been working towards together. I actually really like that Zuko joins the gang later this season, but again, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Alright, let's talk my 4 favorite episodes from book 3. Episode 3, The Painted Lady. This is just a really great one-off of an episode. The basic premise is that the Fire Nation has a munitions factory near a small town, and it's completely polluted their water and entire way of life, and the town is now filled with mostly sick people. So Katara makes Appa appear to be sick to get the gang to stay for a few extra days, all while going into town at night and secretly helping people, and eventually Aang figures it out, and the two go engage in some light eco-terrorism. They quite literally destroy the machines. If you know, you know. Anyway, I just thought this episode rocked. Episode 8, The Puppet Master. Another Qatara-focused one-off episode. Damn, book 3 was really cooking for Qatara. Okay, so basically the gang wander into a town that's been having people strangely disappear every full moon and are taken in by a not suspicious at all old lady innkeeper who reveals herself to be from the Southern Water Tribe, having been taken prisoner by the Fire Nation years before. And we learn that this non-suspicious old lady named Hama is actually responsible for all of the disappearances in the town and has developed her own type of water bending using the water in people's blood, calling it blood bending. And this is just the most metal shit in the entire show. Like, I wanted to go listen to the Black Dahlia murder immediately after watching this episode. I'm gonna cheat on these last 2 episodes and count multi-parters as one single episode because it's my video and I can do what I want. So, episodes 14 and 15, The Boiling Rock. Look, who doesn't love a good prison break? The basic premise for this one is Zuko takes Sokka to the Boiling Rock prison, where the two believe Sokka and Katara's father might be being held. However, when they get there, they find he's not there, but Suki, Sokka's girlfriend, is. So they decide to break her out, and right before they leave, Sokka's dad shows up, so they've got to blow up their old plan and start from scratch. Which I love. It's just such a good way for a prison break storyline to go. You have the perfect plan and are ready to go, only for everything to fall apart at the last second. This episode is also great because it's where May and Ty Lee finally turn against Azula, and I just love this turn and how much it sends Azula spiraling. She really thought she could have friendships based entirely on fear, and when these two go against her, it completely shatters her mind. Which brings us to the 4-part finale, Sozin's Comet. Look, I'm not going to break this whole finale down, so here are just the quick hits about everything that worked about the finale for me. I guess let's just start with Azula. I love the way she slowly loses her mind as she's preparing to become the Fire Lord and is banishing everyone who's ever helped her in fear that they'll betray her, just like May and Ty Lee did. And her final battle with Zuko and Qatara is just awesome. It's just incredible animation. I love the Order of the White Lotus. I just had a great time every single time these guys were on screen. Sokka, Suki, and Toth taking down the Fire Nation airships is badass and just great action storytelling. And of course, Aang's realization that he can beat the Fire Lord without killing him, I thought was really strong storytelling and fit not only the character but the story overall perfectly. We've watched throughout this entire show as Aang struggles with violence. I mean, he's even vegetarian, believing all life to be sacred. And I like how everyone, even the past avatars, are telling Aang he's going to have to kill the Fire Lord, right up until he finds a way to defeat him without killing him. And then Aang and Katara kiss, and that's pretty much it. Aside from the tease with Zuko looking for his mom, and again, not disappointed by this ending, I just wanted a little more. It felt like there was more story to tell to me. So overall, I really enjoyed the show. I would put it in the top tier of animated shows I've seen, up there with Cowboy Bebop, Spider-Man the Animated Series, Batman the Animated Series, Demon Slayer. Anyway, Avatar: The Last Airbender rocks, and the thing that makes it so compelling is the characters the world is populated with. So with that in mind, let's go through and talk through each of the main characters and their arcs and what I like about all of them. I'm going to try and keep it brief because this is already going to be my longest video yet, but no promises. Okay, let's just start with our main character, Aang, voiced by Zach Tyler Eisen, the titular Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I think Aang has a near perfect story arc when we're looking at the typical hero's journey and him learning balance. Really, Aang's entire arc boils down to acceptance. He has to accept that the Air Nation is gone and that it's not his fault. He has to accept it when Appa is stolen from him. He has to learn to accept the anger that dwells within him as well. And I think book 1 does a really good job of introducing how fallible Aang is as a character. At one point, he decided to try firebending all on his own, and he gets it pretty quickly. However, in the process, he accidentally burns Qatara and then swears off firebending altogether, feeling like that amount of power is just too dangerous for anyone to wield. And Aang's arc is about understanding that whether he likes it or not, that power is a part of him. I just really love how dark Aang's arc gets in book 2 once Appa has been taken, and then again when he loses everything at the end of book 2. This show tests him, and while he may not rise to the occasion every single time, he does when it matters the most, and at the end of the day, he's the hero, he gets the girl, and he ends the war. I also really like that Aang is forced to confront the reality of his actions immediately, believing that it's his fault the Fire Nation has taken over and his people have been completely wiped out. And sure, on the one hand, had he not run away, stood strong and faced up to his destiny, maybe things would have been different. But at the same time, how could he have saved his people? He had just found out he was the Avatar and hadn't even begun to master the other elements yet. Had he been there when the Fire Nation came, he'd have been wiped out just like everyone else. But overall, I just like that Aang goes from being more concerned with being a kid and playing to being angry and frustrated by the loss of Appa to the shattering realization that he failed at the end of book 2, and then overcoming all of it to find his own path. I know I keep saying it, but it really is just strong storytelling. Okay, now let's talk Zuko. Voiced by Dante Bosco, like I said earlier, I think he has the strongest arc in the entire show. His entire arc is based on redemption, that you can rise above your own mistakes and be better. When the show starts, Zuko is angry and determined. He believes the only way to restore his honor is to capture the Avatar for his father. But as the story unfolds, we realize that Zuko didn't actually lose his honor. He's just been told he has so many times that he believes it. Learning that Zuko's face was burned as a consequence for sticking up for the Fire Nation soldiers is a stunning early reveal that shows that Zuko maybe isn't the bad guy after all. And the reveal that it was his father, voiced by Mark Hamill, that burned his face is just stunning. And Zuko's arc is a lot of little victories against his worst instincts. And then I love watching him and Iroh build a life together in Ba Sing Se, and how he gives into his worst instincts at just the wrong moment and blows it all up, only to begin his redemption once again from scratch in the final batch of episodes. And that's what I like about Zuko boiled down. No matter how many times he messes up, he finds his way back to doing what he believes is right. He's a character that holds strong in his convictions. It just takes him some time to learn what those convictions are. And on that note, let's talk about Uncle Iroh, voiced flawlessly by Mako for the first 2 books before his tragic death while book 2 was premiering. The final episode, voiced by Mako, is the season 2 finale, and in season 3, the character was taken over by Greg Baldwin, who does a great job in an impossible role to fill. But seriously, Uncle Iroh is the real heart of Avatar. The angel on Zuko's shoulder, always nudging him in the right direction, but never outright pointing. And I love that we see Toph and Iroh get to have this nice conversation together before either knows that the other is supposedly an enemy, and that it has a lifelong effect on how Toph sees the world and the people in her life. And I've already said it multiple times, but I just love that Iroh and Zuko get to build a life together in Ba Sing Se. No matter how brief it was, I just think it was strong writing and storytelling, because when it's taken away from them, it's heartbreaking. I also just love that Iroh is secretly one of the strongest firebenders on the planet, and that he realizes that doesn't mean he has to be a warmongering conqueror and can live a peaceful life if that's what he chooses. Again, I love Uncle Iroh. Moving on to Qatara, voiced by Mae Whitman. Her? Much like all of the characters in the show, Qatara has a really strong arc, going from being an amateur waterbender to one of the best on the planet by the end of the show. But what makes Qatara's arc so strong is her relationship to the people she meets throughout the show. When the show begins, she is overly trusting and naive, and over time we watch that bite her in the ass over and over again. And one of the final straws is Zuko betraying the group after she and him have their moment while locked up together. And after that, it's tougher for her to trust people, and she's much quicker to violence and being angry. story, but she's still naive. In the Puppet Master episode, we watch as Qatara ignores every little red flag that Hama throws out there and is psyched to be learning from another waterbender, only to understand that she horribly misread who Hama was as a person and understands the power and danger of bloodbending. And that anger just boils and festers inside Qatara until she and Zuko take their trip to track down the man that murdered her mother. And I like that everyone in the camp knows it's a bad idea, even Zuko. But I think Zuko recognizes that the only way for Qatara to let go is to confront this man, and I like that Qatara has fully convinced herself that she's capable of murdering in cold blood because it's in the name of vengeance, but in the final moments she can't do it. And this is when Qatara realizes who she actually is as a person. It's a strong arc, and there are a million other little details to get into with Qatara, but again, I'm trying to be brief, so moving on to Sokka. Oh, Sokka, our lovable idiot turned military strategy genius and fearless warrior, voiced by Jack Decina. When we start the show, Sokka is a self-conscious, untalented, but still fearless dork who makes weirdly sexist comments all the time. And I like that Sokka is constantly being forced to test himself throughout the show. He has to test his beliefs and his abilities. I actually really like episode 4 from book 3, Sokka's Master, and it just missed being in my top 4 episodes from that season. It was nice that Sokka was able to realize he wasn't fully contributing to the group in the way he wanted to be, and he found someone to teach him, and the sword he makes is badass. But seriously, Sokka is the source of a lot of comic relief throughout the show, but he also does the most growing up out of all of our characters. Like, Sokka quite literally starts the show as a boy and ends it as a war hero. I mean, so does Aang, but still. And I mentioned it earlier, but the stuff with Sokka and Yue in book 1 is just solid writing, and I like how much that first relationship affects Sokka for the rest of the show. Like, it's such a pivotal moment for his character learning about love and loss, and it informs all of the growth he goes through over the next 2 books. Moving on to Toph, voiced by Michaela Jill Murphy. So just really like the way that Toph goes from being fully self-reliant when first joining the group and not wanting to do her part to being the one that has to convince the group that letting Zuko joining up with them is the right thing for the group because of what he can contribute. Plus, I just like that Toph is a total badass and creates the ability to bend metal out of sheer willpower, and again, that she's stronger than pretty much every single person she goes up against, all while being blind and seeing through her feet. And I also think that Toph is secretly the funniest character on the show. She's so sarcastic and the first person to make a blind joke, and she's just a good time. Although I am a little sad that she doesn't get a proper love interest like everyone else in our main group of heroes, but only because it seems like she really wants one throughout the show. Like, she seems to have a crush on Sokka and Zuko at different points. But seriously, other than that, Toph is a perfect character. Okay, let's end talking about the real heart of the show, Appa. Like I said earlier, when Appa was kidnapped and gone from the show, his absence is what kept my wife and I binging through episodes waiting for some sign of Appa. And then we got to Appa's Lost Days, and I'm not even joking, it made both my wife and I cry incredibly hard. Plus, Appa looks straight out of a Miyazaki movie, and that's badass. I just love Appa, and if you don't love Appa, you're a liar and or you are dead inside, and I just wanted to make sure we ended this section talking about this beautiful boy. But seriously, I had a great time watching through Avatar: The Last Airbender for the first time, and I know I should regret waiting so long to watch it, but I don't. It was a much needed treat, and if this video does well and you guys want me to do videos on the other parts of the Avatar franchise, let me know in the comments below. Or if you want more of these videos where I watch classics that I haven't seen before, let me know that too. These videos are really fun for me to make, and I like filling in my blind spots. Don't get me wrong, I love rewatching and talking about old movies I've seen 1,000 times, but sometimes it's nice to do a video on something I haven't seen before. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. Truly, it means the world. This is Brandon from Born to Rant reminding you to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We release new videos covering all things nerd culture every Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.